We can't talk about the legislative branch without investigating the process of lawmaking, which is the main reason we have a legislative branch or Congress in the first place. I won't tell you that it's a simple process. In fact, it's multi-layer, multi-step, and it's actually quite complicated. However, as with most complicated topics, we will attempt to distill the complexities down to the bare essentials so that you, at the very least, have a rudimentary or elementary understanding of where and how this nation's laws come to be. Our discussion begins by defining a term that you will hear quite a bit as we discuss the lawmaking process in Congress, and that term is the term bill. A bill is simply a proposed law. A bill is to a law as an egg is to a chicken. In order for an egg to hatch and become a chick, there are a number of biological hurdles that first must be met and subsequently overcome. There's no guarantee that every egg laid by a chicken one day eventually hatches, becomes a chick, and matures into a chicken. Some will be laid but never hatch. Others may be damaged after being laid, and still others may end up as part of a belly buster omelet. The bottom line is not all eggs hatch, and even those that do, not all chicks mature into chickens or roosters. Similarly, every year in Congress, thousands of bills or potential laws are introduced, but because of the nature of the legislative process, which you are about to learn, very few are able to successfully run the gauntlet and transition into laws. So, when you hear the term bill, understand that it is the original state of a law before it successfully navigates the lawmaking process and finds itself safely tucked away inside some old, musty, dusty law book. Bottom line is a bill must be introduced by a member of Congress, a member of either the House of Representatives or the Senate. However, an idea for a bill can come from anyone, even a 13, 14, or 15-year-old junior high student. Ideas for bills come from U.S. citizens. Every day, people in this country contact their congressmen and congresswomen with concerns of national or local importance. They contact their legislators because they believe that the solutions to these concerns lay within the powers of Congress to solve via some law. And it is your absolute right as a member of this nation, and that's what a citizen is, a member of the nation. It is well within your right to contact your legislators and request solutions to problems you observe. And the more people that reach out, the more legislators feel the pressure to act. Ideas also come from the President of the United States. Now, the President themselves can't formally introduce laws, but they can publicly propose ideas for laws. Congress is, of course, under no obligation to introduce bills based on the president's ideas. However, the more popular a president is, the more pressure they'll feel. Additionally, if the majority party in Congress and the president find themselves in the same political party, you'll find a greater willingness on behalf of Congress to take a president's ideas, craft them into bills, and attempt to run them through Congress so they can become laws. Ideas also come from organized groups, like, for example, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which I'm not endorsing, simply using as an example. We could have mentioned the NRA, the National Rifle Association, or the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. Most people understand the idea of strength in numbers. So, sometimes, in order to make their voices heard and force action on the part of members of government, people form special interest groups who work to take the goals of the group and shape them into laws that help the group achieve their aims. Members of Congress, as well as congressional committees, which you'll learn about later, can also be sources for an idea for a bill. Bottom line is an idea for a bill can come from anyone. Here's a groovy little ditty from the far out 1970s that does a great job foreshadowing all the twists and turns in the legislative process that you're about to learn. Feel free to sing along.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill. He signed your bill, now you're a law. Oh, yeah.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm a... Oh, sorry. You caught me unawares in a moment of legislative revelry. Now, we will look at the legislative process itself. First, I'll lay out in words with some of the finer details, and eventually we'll build a diagram that hopefully simplifies the process by laying it out visually. So the first step in the process, as you can see, is the introduction of the bill or potential law. This means the bill has to be written up. Traditionally, it is then dropped in a hopper, which is like a giant sideways drum within the chamber of the House of Representatives or the Senate. Now, honestly, I don't know if this still happens today in the technologically advanced 21st century. My guess is that now that everything is done electronically, even voting within the chamber takes place via electronic format. So I'd be surprised if someone had to physically drop the bill into this antiquated hopper. However, that still remains as a piece of the legislative process. After the bill has been submitted, it is given a name. While the bill generally will have a cute and fuzzy name like the Patriot Act or the USA Freedom Act, the official name used to track the bill is derived from the following process. If the bill is introduced in the House of Representatives, it is tagged with the letters HR. It is then given a number, in this instance 742. The number refers to the order that this bill was introduced during the current legislative session. So HR Bill 742 would be the 742nd bill introduced in the House of Representatives during a legislative session. If the bill were introduced in the Senate, it would get tagged with an S and a number that once again represents the order in which it was introduced. So Bill S2368 would be the 2368th bill introduced in the Senate during the current legislative process. After the bill is named, it heads to the next crucial step, which is being sent to a congressional committee. Congressional committees are small groups within Congress formed to study bills. Every member of Congress belongs to one, and some belong to two. Each committee has its own special topic for which they consider bills. For example, there are committees on the armed services, banking, the environment, etc. So depending on the nature of the bill, it is sent to a committee that is most relevant. It's here in these committees that most of the lawmaking work takes place. It's done here because these committees are made up of roughly 10 members, and it's much easier for 10 or so people to discuss and shape a bill as compared to the entire 100 members of the Senate or the 435 members of the House. So, this is where most of the legislative work takes place. It's also the place where, after being sent to committee, most bills never re-emerge. And to illustrate that point, enjoy this clip, but don't blink or you may miss it.
They call me Bill, yes, they call me Bill, and I'm standing here on Capitol. Oh!
If a bill receives enough support within its committee, that bill emerges from the committee and is now considered by the entire body or house into which the bill was introduced. So in our example, the bill was introduced in the House, was tagged with the letter HR and a number, was then sent to the appropriate House committee, where apparently it passed muster and now is being debated and discussed by the entire 435 members in the House of Representatives. Now, after being shaped by the committee, it makes more sense for this larger group of 435 to weigh in on the merits of the bill. After debate and discussion, a vote will take place. In order for the bill to survive and advance, a majority, meaning 218 or more members of the House, must vote yes on the bill. If you don't get 218 or more, the bill can return to committee for more work, but at this point, it's not looking good for our hypothetical little egg. If the bill gets 218 or more yeses, then it heads to the United States Senate, and the whole process has to play itself out again in the other half of Congress. Hopefully at this point, you can see why even though thousands of bills may be introduced into Congress in a given year, very few survive the legislative process and end up hatching into law. After being looked at by a Senate committee, the much-traveled bill, if it's lucky, will be considered by the 100 senators who make up the United States Senate. Now, there are some unique aspects of debate in the United States Senate that don't exist in the House, and we are going to take a moment to look at those procedural oddities before looking at where the bill heads next. Unlike the House of Representatives, there is no time limit on the amount of debate in the Senate. In the House of Representatives, items of discussion and debate are placed on a legislative calendar and given set amounts of time for debate and discussion. When those time periods expire in the House of Representatives, the House moves on to their next piece of scheduled business. They can always reschedule unfinished business, but the point is they have time limits for their discussion. In the Senate, that is not the case. So, in the Senate, this results in a unique opportunity for someone who sees their side coming up short in a vote to delay a vote by making use of the fact that there are no time limits for debate and discussion in the Senate. This process of talking a bill to death is known as a filibuster. So, if you know a vote is coming up on a bill and you don't support the bill, but you know enough others do, you can, as a senator, get up when called upon and begin speaking. And as long as you don't yield the floor and you don't sit down or stop talking, you can talk indefinitely, so that a vote on that bill you don't support can't be called for. As soon as you yield the floor or you can no longer continue talking, another Senate member can take the floor and call for a vote. Once you have the floor, there is no rule that specifies what you must talk about. So some senators have read word for word from the Constitution. Others have read from their favorite cookbooks. And just a couple of years ago, via the magic of television, one senator by the name of Ted Cruz read Green Eggs and Ham to his 2 children who were getting ready for bed as Daddy filibustered on the Senate floor.
And now, another fact of Congress. Does it seem like lawmakers talk and talk for hours on end? In order to prevent a vote on a bill, senators will talk through the night. This is called a filibuster. A filibuster allows a senator to take control of the Senate floor by talking at great length. Senate rules say that a vote can only occur when debate ends. And if debate never ends, there is no vote. The idea is to slow down the legislative process, creating more time for a particular issue to be considered. A 3/5 Senate majority, or 60 votes, ends a filibuster. The record for the longest filibuster goes to South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond, who held the Senate floor continuously for 24 hours and 18 minutes. That's a lot of chatter, and that's another fact of Congress.
Now, there is a way to prevent a filibuster, but that requires something called cloture, which means if 3/5 of the senators, meaning 60 of the 100 senators, vote for a time limit on debate in the Senate, a time limit can be imposed. However, cloture is hard to get because one party rarely holds 60 seats by themselves, which means if you want to stop a filibuster, you'll need help from the other political party. And you will rarely see this because chances are if one person in the minority party doesn't like a bill enough to filibuster, that means there are probably many others who, too, don't like the bill and prefer the filibuster to losing a vote on a bill they don't support. So a filibuster is not invincible, but it is hard to defeat, so it has become an effective weapon of parties determined to prevent votes on bills they don't agree with. After all the hurdles our little bill has faced, it still has to play the boss level. Finally, the President of the United States has an official role in the lawmaking process. Here, the bill is sent to the President. Once there are 4 possibilities for the bill, but basically only 2 outcomes. The first is if the President approves of the law, that President can sign their name to the bill, signifying a successful transformation from bill to law. Our egg has hatched. Or the President can stomp the egg, but putting down a presidential veto. A veto is the President's ability to reject a bill, essentially denying it the ability to become a law. Now, there is a way to override the President's veto, but that requires this vetoed bill, essentially on life support, limping its way back through Congress, Although this time, instead of requiring a 51% vote at every stop, and remember how hard it was to survive needing only 51%, this bill could limp its way back through Congress this time, however, requiring a supermajority or 2/3 votes, 67 of the 100 senators, to override the president's veto. So when the president slams down the veto, the bill is darn near dead. The other two possibilities require the bill to sit on the president's desk for 10 days. If Congress is in session, that bill will become law without the president's signature. Understand that this simply saves the president from having to return to the White House, especially if he or she were overseas, to sign a bill. If it's a bill the president supports, they can let it sit. And if Congress is in session and hasn't voted to go home for 10 days, and it automatically becomes law. Understand that if this is a bill the president has been championing, know darn well that the president will be there for the signing of the bill, and so will plenty of media reporters. This is a signature moment for a president, getting a bill they've wanted through Congress, so there will be all sorts of media there to observe the egg hatching. Now, if Congress is not in session, so it's December and the end of their session and they've voted to go home, if that bill sits on the president's desk for 10 days and Congress is not in session, then the bill is automatically vetoed. The president does not have to take any action or return from overseas to kill a bill they don't want. If Congress has gone home and the bill sits on their desk for 10 days, it is automatically whacked with what is called a pocket veto. This prevents Congress from dumping a bunch of bills on the president's desk and laughing all the way out of town, thinking that there's not enough time for the president to act, and they'll ram through a bunch of legislation by overwhelming the president so they've no time to act. No, Congress knows that they need to be assured of presidential support or stay in session to be available to work on bills the president vetoes, and they can't just dump a mass of bills and bail, attempting to overwhelm the president. Bills that sit on a president's desk for 10 days when Congress is not in session are automatically pocket vetoed. Therefore, the two basic outcomes after a bill hits the president's desk are the bill becomes a law or the bill is killed. Lastly, we are going to take all that we just covered and attempt to illustrate it with a diagram. Hopefully, if you have had trouble following the legislative process thus far, this might be the moment where it all clicks. Understand that every bill begins as an idea. An idea for a bill can come from anywhere. However, a bill must be introduced by a member of Congress. And there are two paths that we are going to look at in this legislative process. And the first one begins in the House of Representatives. So our bill is introduced in the House. The next step is for the legislative work to begin. Where does most of the lawmaking work in Congress happen? Hopefully you mentioned those small lawmaking groups in Congress formed to consider bills, the committees. Here's where the shaping of the bill will take place. And if the bill is lucky, if it gets enough work, it will eventually be considered by the entire House as a whole, where they will continue debate and discussion and ultimately vote. If a majority of House members approve of the bill moves on to the next step, which is the other half of Congress, the United States Senate. And once the senators get their hands on the bill, they too will have to do some reworking of the bill. So where will they send the bill? Where does most of the lawmaking work take place? Hopefully you said committee. And if this bill is once again a bill strong enough to survive the committee, if it has enough support, it will eventually be considered by the entire Senate as a whole. Understand that if at any point during their consideration of the bill, if the Senate makes any changes to the bill, whether that be in a Senate committee or as the entire Senate considers the bill, that bill will ultimately have to return to the House of Representatives and once again be voted on and approved because it is altered, or changed. Any bill that arrives on the president's desk must gain approval from both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, in the same exact form and wording for the bill. For the sake of argument, let's pretend that our Senate makes no changes to the bill approved by the House of Representatives. And after their debate and discussion wraps up, they will take a vote. And if 51 of the 100 senators support this bill, the bill will end up on the president's desk, where the president can either sign the bill, making it law, or apply the veto, essentially killing the bill. Now, a bill does not have to begin in the House. A bill could be introduced in the Senate, the only exception being a bill that deals with taxes. So if a bill is introduced in the Senate, that bill will be sent to committee for the majority of the lawmaking work to take place. If it survives a committee, the entire Senate will consider it. A bill that advances requires 51 yes votes from senators before it can be sent to the House, where they too will send that bill to committee. Eventually, it'll be considered by the entire House before once again ending up on the president's desk. Hopefully, this diagram that illustrates the path a bill must take in order to become a law helps your understanding of the legislative process.